trying to put this in perspective, a couple of years ago, we were in a knockdown fight for our lives to get $125,000 appropriated to continue the study portion of deepening the Port of Charleston in a post-earmark environment. There was no money in the President's budget for Charleston, and as you remember, I basically said we're not going to do any more business in the Senate until we get that fixed. Senator Reid, the Vice President's office, a lot of people came forward and found $125,000 in the current system to avoid that problem. The next thing that happened is the President put funding for the study in his budget. That was much appreciated, so that avoided the earmark problem, at least for that year. You got to remember, an earmark is when Congress puts something in the budget that was not originally presented by the President. That is the new definition of what an earmark is. So we've been fortunate for the last 2 years to have money to continue the study portion of deepening the Port of Charleston through the President's budget. The problem is that the study is taking so long that the Panama Canal will be open to these supercargo ships, and we will not be anywhere near deepening the harbor, and we're going to lose market share. So the second initiative we've been trying to deal with is speeding up the process of the study, design, construction. There's 3 phases to deepening the harbor: study, design, construct. The whole overall project's about $350 million. Governor Haley brought this up to President Obama, and the Vice President in her meeting where the governors met with the President months back. Joe Riley met with the President personally over this. So did Congressman Clyburn. Every Republican member of our delegation has been 100% supportive of the idea that Charleston is a worthy project for the federal government to engage in. So where do we stand now? This announcement by the White House last night that they've designated, I think it's 6 or 7 ports of national and regional significance is a very big step forward. The announcement means that the study portion will be accelerated to be completed in 2015. That's a year ahead of what we negotiated. That's good news, but the problems still loom large. Accelerating the study doesn't deal with the funding and the authorization. Only Congress can come up with the actual money, and we have to give authorization to go beyond the study. So once the study's complete, you can't do design construction unless the Congress authorizes it. So there's still many challenges ahead, but the fact that the administration designated 7 ports for regional and national significance means that we're beginning to develop a vision of about a port system, not just a earmarked vision that's no greater than your backyard. So I want to applaud the administration for doing this. When it comes to Charleston, it does accelerate the study. But here's the goal. My goal is to create a national vision for ports, inland and coastal, that will prepare us to deal with the expansion of the Panama Canal, but more importantly, meet the goal set by President Obama of doubling exports. Our inland ports are not where they need to be. The Inland Trust Fund is not nearly robust enough to deal with our inland waterways. Once you get cargo off the dock at the coast, you can drive it to the interior of the country, or you can ship it down rivers like the Mississippi River, and those ports inland have to be dealt with as well as coastal ports. So I'm working with the authorizing committee, the EPW committee, and the appropriators, of which I'm a member, to try to come up with a vision for the country as a whole that would include money to upgrade coastal ports east and west and inland ports. We don't know how much that's going to cost, but given a $3-point-something trillion budget, it's going to be, excuse me, almost a rounding error. You know, for somewhere in the $20 billion range, I think what we can do is really modernize our inland and coastal ports in a way never done before. And one of the reasons we're thinking this way is because when you ban earmarks, you have to think of another way of doing business. And what I've been advocating is not just for Charleston, even though that's my primary concern, is for the nation as a whole. and you begin to see that vision take shape. So we're in discussions with members of the authorizing committee, Senator Inhofe and Boxer, myself, Senator Alexander from Tennessee, and Feinstein from California, are trying to work together to do two things. Inventory how much it would cost to modernize our ports, coastal and inland. Then what kind of regulatory changes would we need to make to allow the deepening of our coastal and inland ports to happen faster so we don't lose market share. So it's a two-step process, creating a pot of money so you don't have to worry about year-to-year budgets, designate a pot of money that will be allocated for port deepening and infrastructure improvement, coastal and inland, as a one-time appropriation, enough money to fix the problem, and have a vision created rather than a year-by-year approach. The second thing, part B of that approach, is to change our laws so that we can make this happen in real time, being environmentally sensitive, but accelerating the ability of the Corps and other groups to get the job done faster. That's where we're headed to. That approach, I think, would be revolutionary. It would be a visionary approach versus an earmark approach. It would deal with the problem once and for all for decades. And I think it's going to take collaboration between Republicans and Democrats. Finally, what you see happening yesterday was a result of the debate about Charleston Harbor expanding. I am very pleased that our insistence that Charleston not be left behind has gotten people's attention, and we've made a good case that Charleston Harbor is a regional and nationally significant port. That's good news for the people of South Carolina and the Southeast. But there's a lot more to be done. But the real upside to all this for me is that we've been working as a team in South Carolina. The governor, the congressional delegation, the State House, by putting $300 million aside, which is more than the South Carolina's matching portion of study, construct, and design, it's a signal to the federal government that South Carolina is serious about deepening her port. So to our legislative body, putting that money in a pot is a great tool for me to work with in Washington. When our governor brought this project up to President Obama, it created a real buzz. Congressman Clyburn has been a great partner in using his influence in the Democratic Party. Senator DeMint and I have been working on a substitute for earmarks for a very long time, and that's beginning to bear fruit. And to the new members of the delegation, they came in on a very conservative wave, but all of them, particularly Tim Scott, have been very helpful in trying to make sure that we get the Port of Charleston right. But the really bottom line to all this is that not only are we making progress on the Charleston Harbor with much left to be done, we're expanding our view of the problem, and we're creating a national vision that has been lacking. So I am very pleased, and there's much to be done, but we're making very bold steps.
Senator, the fact that this was approved by the Obama administration, I think there's been, it almost sounds like this might be the administration deciding which has priority as opposed to maybe a balanced view of everybody deciding. In fact, I guess they're going to make some political hay out of the president's trip to Florida today. The two of these ports that he designated are in Florida. What's your thought on that? Is this just sort of moving the priority list to the administration?
My belief is that this is a significant step forward in a national vision that's been lacking. I'm not questioning the politics of the decision, but what it does is putting in play a model that I've been long advocating, looking at the region and the country as a whole beyond earmarking. Now, the Congress will go beyond what the President did last night. The Congress intends to look at inland ports, West Coast ports, East Coast ports in a more comprehensive fashion. But the fact that the administration started looking at ports in a new way, saying that these 7, in their view, were regionally and nationally significant ports is a step in the right direction. But the goal is working with the administration to go beyond that and deal with inland and coastal ports as a unit. So this is progress. It helps Charleston. Be grateful. There's more to do.
Any other questions?
Senator, one story that I read about this implied that this was, in essence, a commitment of the money, that federal money that is needed to do the project. Is that correct?
Not completely. This is a commitment to accelerate the process,
right.
But the money eventually has to be appropriated by the Congress.
Got it.
No, we haven't dealt with the funding issues. This is just the study portion for Charleston. So we still got to get design and construction money, which is the bulk of the money. This accelerates the study phase. It does help us with funding to get the study completed because it's an authorization for the study phase. But Congress has to authorize design and eventually construction. So that is left undone, and we have to appropriate the money.
Thank you.
Senator, just wanted to ask you to clarify again. I know you addressed it a little bit earlier, but in your opinion, why is it so important that this project be done or the approval come a year earlier than it would have?
We're facing competition from China. The Panama Canal expansion is now expected to be completed in 2015. Well, companies are going to start signing contracts with ports. And those ports that are marching forward and look like they're going to be ready for business are going to be in a good spot. So the sooner we can get our ports ready to be deepened, the more likely we are to get contracts. And the sooner the nation as a whole deals with Panama Canal expansion issues, such as deepening harbors, and this will be based on merit, not old school politics, the better off we are, because China is lurking in the Caribbean and around Cuba to look at building deep water ports to accept these ships. So we're in a competition not only with China, but we're also basically in a competition with other sites to be able to get contracts. So that's why it's important. Anytime you can accelerate the study portion of this, and my vision of looking at east and west coast and inland ports, the Part B that I talked about, Part A is putting money aside that will be a pot of money to be used to get it done, and you don't have to worry about yearly appropriations. Part B will be regulatory reform, even to speed it up faster than what the administration did. My goal is to accelerate the timetable, but I am very pleased that they chose to accelerate. I think we can even do more.
Senator, officials with the Army Corps said that this was kind of news to them, this initiative and the timetable. Is this something that we think can be done at a time with the Corps, or is it something that like another goal?
We're going to need help from the Congress. We got to do Part A is funding. Instead of having a yearly battle about funding, I think Congress would be wise, working with the administration, to put a pot of money aside to deal with the port issues completely, inland, coastal, east and west. Secondly, you've got to change the regulatory environment to get these things done in a real-world time. So the Corps is going to benefit from certain funding, and the Corps is going to need to step up their game, but the Congress is going to have to change the regulatory environment for them to execute in a more timely fashion. So there are limits on the Corps' ability right now under the current structure. We're going to have to, by putting money aside dedicated for ports now and in the future, rather than an annual appropriation, that solves one of the problems the Corps faces. The other problem is a lot of the regulations that we have today make it impossible to do this in a timely fashion. They have to be changed. And so the Congress needs to come in and make this more achievable for the Corps.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.